Forgive me if I sound like I've been beaten by a dead horse. Or something. I read all of the comments, every single one. I know I've said that before, but I do. I want to pay attention to what you guys are saying. There's a lot to learn. Plus, I really like to see what engines people want to see torn down. Sometimes it's not something I will run across, but sometimes it is. And then sometimes someone brings me one. Just brings me one. A fan of the channel came by and picked up a 5.3 and some associated parts, and he brought me a gift. A 3.7 liter GM Atlas engine. At last, an Atlas. Been waiting to say that. And if it wasn't for Bill, thank you Bill, for bringing this engine by, we wouldn't have this. I don't typically buy vehicles with Atlas engines, and I don't really see them as cores that often at the places I go to. So this is almost the only situation where I'd have this here. And for that, I thank you so much. Hopefully you and your girls like watching this video. We're going to find out what happened here. I will tell you one spoiler for you guys. Someone installed an inspection port. I don't know why you would do it behind the starter. You can't see through the starter. Bill did share a few details about this engine, which I appreciate. Most of these cores, I have no idea. This engine came from a 2011 Chevrolet Colorado, which he is LS swapping. I think that's awesome. He told me that the seller of said Colorado told him the engine had a slight knock, and it was a bad engine. Hole is not really the same thing as a slight knock, but we'll go with it. Now, I haven't worked on one of these engines in depth ever. I've never torn one down. I've never really had one through the shop. It's just not something I go after. So there's going to be a lot to learn here for me, and probably for you as well. One thing I did hear over and over and over again is that the head bolts are on the tight side of things. But don't worry, we have the tools. Now, normally we'd start by pulling a harness. No, wait. We always start with the spark plugs, but this doesn't have any. It also doesn't have any manifolds on it. So we're going to go right to pulling the valve cover. I guess I didn't mention that this is an inline 5, for those of you that don't know. This is not a 6-cylinder or a 4-cylinder. It's in the middle. It's an inline 5. And it looks pretty varnished in here. I don't really see anything terrible yet. This is actually a very simple engine. It's very traditional. There's nothing crazy inside. And everything looked pretty okay at first glance. It's always at first glance. But if you look a little closer, a little bit closer, you start noticing, man, those cams don't look so hot. This is very rough textured here. I can feel it through my glove. Why would the lobes be wiped out? Maybe they used Hemi cams. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. Relax. Relax. And this is a later engine because it has variable valve timing. I don't think the early ones had this. You can see there's the actuator there. There's the oil control solenoid. And then there's a trigger wheel for the cam sensor. I think at this point, the next step is to get the chain loose, get the cam gears out so we can pull the cams. That's what we'll do next. I'm actually kidding. We're going to turn this thing over. Why wouldn't we? That's not a good sign. Also not a good sign. Oh, okay, we're good. It's going to be fine. All right, let's get this cam gear out of the way so we can get the chain off. This is the appropriate tool. Sounded like a timing chain tensioner. There we go. Can I get this out without pulling the cam gear? Yes. I think. As I was cracking those cam caps loose, I noticed there's a little bit of sparkles in the cylinder head. Just a little. The first thing I'd like to mention, and I do like saying this, is that with the exception of this end cam cap, the rest of these cam caps have replaceable bearings, and nothing tickles my fancy like serviceable parts. So not so much that one, but these all have replaceable bearings. That's cool. However, we got some damage. There's definitely been some metal run through this engine, and look at those cam lobes. They're rough. This could have been a pretty high mileage engine. Again, I have no basis for comparison. This is the very first one of these I've torn down. The other cam, much of the same. There's also wear on the cylinder head consistent with metal running through an engine in the oiling system. There's even some damage to some of the rollers. It doesn't really take much. Now, if you notice, there's two plugs on the front of the cylinder head. I'm going to remove these, and then there are bolts behind that hold the timing guides to the cylinder head. If I don't do that, I won't be able to pull the cylinder head. Should not use an impact with these. They are plastic. And now we can take the 10mm headed bolts behind them out. Now there's a few 10mm bolts that hold the front of the cylinder head to the front of the block and timing cover area. Before I get ahead of myself, I'm going to make sure that this is actually drained. Oh, there's it's silver. It's silvery sparkles. We're just going to let that go for a little bit. Now, there's no signs of foul play in the intake ports. It's just dirty. We're going to try to make this as easy as possible. Well, let me do something about that. I'm going to pull all of these rollers out of here so they don't go everywhere. Now, turn this the rest of the way over. All crunchy stuff. Just a little bit more. Okay, let's see how tight these really are. Okay. Wow, it popped on the recoil. Holy cow. Oh, this is great. So far, they're not as tight as the Mercedes, not even close. This is going to be great for my back. I can just tell. These are by far the loudest head bolts. I just want you to watch my socket here. I think that's the last one. All right, now we can get the head bolts out. Okay, now at this point, the head should just come right off, right? That's it's just gonna pop right off. I don't know how heavy this is. Feels like it's gonna come off. Uh-oh. Something's wrong there. Let's get this head gasket off without slicing my fingers. Let's see what we've got going on here. There's a chain. There's a rail. Wow, it just kind of sits in there. Okay. Does this one sit in there? No, that one's bolted in. Okay, so these are all good. Found the problem. It's disconnected. If you look, the piston is actually rotated in the bore. And I see one little ding, okay, two little dings on the top of the piston, likely from hitting valves. Just a little bitty. We're going to not push that too far. That might stop the engine from turning. So let's go look at the cylinder head. This actually looks pretty good, at least towards the front. Combustion chambers are dirty, but I don't see any valve damage. Then you get cylinder 5, and that's the one with the disconnecting rod. And if you look right along the edge of the combustion chamber, you'll see marks. That's from that piston traveling too far in the bore and making contact with the combustion chamber. And typically that happens at idle. You know, you're not doing anything wrong, no high RPM. Here is a much better look at the inspection port, and actually it's in a really good location because you can see the rod very well. It almost feels like the rod made the hole. You can see that there's a lot of heat and it's been hammered a lot. That was used as a blunt object to create the inspection port. Now we're going to tap the piston down and see if the rod moves. It does. Okay. Oh, there we go. Get back in there. There, now it's good to go. Now normally I would flip this engine over to remove the pan, but I don't really want to fish pieces of rods and whatever else is in there out of the rest of the engine. I just want to drop it like a diaper. It's the best word I could come up with. Oh, I guess we should get the dipstick out of the way. Oh, come on. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Really? You guys are not going to believe this. I don't even believe it. You guys are just not going to believe this. I didn't do this at all. That is a socket and an extension. It is a Cobalt, so I probably can't read what size it is. But I would guess, it's a 10 millimeter. Is this where they end up? Is this really it? This is where all the 10s go. And check your oil pans, guys. All of the missing 10s are there. How? Like, how? I'm perplexed. And here is the remnants of the rod and some bearing foil, broken rod bolt, more bearing material, and lots of sparkles. Too many sparkles. And then there's a couple pieces of piston. So we don't have a perfect piston in there. We're going to find some damage. Maybe that's block damage. I don't know. But how? I don't have an answer, guys. Bill, if this is your socket, please come back and get it or send me your address and I'll mail it to you. I know what it's like to lose a 10. In all reality, this is probably how it happened. This just fell through. This doesn't fit. This doesn't. What the heck? Maybe the crank was in a different spot. That had to be. This has to be how this got in there. It doesn't fit through a piston. There's no holes in there. And the valve cover hadn't been off. It took too much force to get that off. It had to go through this hole. So this is probably either the guy that diagnosed it as a bad engine, or this is yours, Bill. Now let's get this crank pulley out of the way. Oh, okay. It's turning. Let's let my compressor catch up here. Let's try this again. What? It turns it just a little bit at a time. I need more air hose. I know. I only think about it when I'm in a situation like this, and when it's done, it's done. Okay, let's try something else. Now, I'm not supposed to have open flames in the shop, so I had Mexican food for dinner, and I just breathed on it a whole bunch. All right, let's try something else. At this point, I'm going to gently push the rod and piston down in cylinder 5 so that it locks the crank and keeps it from turning, and then hopefully I can do this with a breaker bar. Yes. This bar gets the job done. But why is it so tight all the way through? Wow. I've never had a crank bolt like this. It's not that it's too tight. It's just that it's tight in a different way. It's tight all the way through. All right, I think I can downsize here. I think the impact will take it out now. Ah, it's hot. Damn Mexican food. All right, I've got this kind of set up. I don't know if this is going to work or not. There's only one way to find out. It worked. Now we'll get the water pump pulley off. I think that's the water pump. Yes. Oh, love it when it just falls right off. Next, we'll take the water pump off. Actually looks pretty good. Now we can finally get this front timing cover. Now I'm looking at this, and this looks like this could have something to do with the oil pump. You stick my head down there. Yes, it does. I don't know if I can get this cover off because I think the oil pump is part of it. So we're going to flip this engine over finally so that I can remove the pickup. So the pickup looks in really good shape, but it's more like a bearing foil storage container. There's all kinds of pieces in there. I know what happened here. It starved itself of oil because it was full of metal. And it appears that I could not get that timing cover with the pickup tube in place. So I'm going to get the pickup tube off, And then the timing cover should just slide right off. What is going on here? Why is it under so much tension? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Now this front timing cover is RTV'd on and it has dowels, so it may fight me a little bit. It might be a little bit of a protest. We'll see. They give you places to pry that are right next to the dowels. That is nice. There we go. One timing cover. When I first took the cam gear off and I released the tension on the chain, I heard a ratcheting sound, and that is the timing chain tensioner, which is this right here. Now this chain, that's a fine piece. Very fine. All right, the next thing we're going to do is remove this girdle and main cap plate. We're going to get this out of the way. It'll allow us more room to get to the rods and pistons. I just don't want to work around it. There seems to be a theme with this engine. Oh, no we don't. Okay. We're not going to play that game. I'm actually going to use the breaker bar to try to crack these loose. I think I'll have better luck. Wow. Whew, these are tight. I think these are tighter than the head bolts. Now I can zip these out.
No.
We're going to start at the front of the motor. You guys know why. And we're going to work our way towards the back, get all the rods and pistons out. And then, number 5. You can tell it's medium well. Should never cook your bearings that way. And lots of impact marks. I think I can just push the rod and piston, what's left of them, out of the bore. Something worth noting about this inspection port is that it's also a piston inspection port, because if you keep... Hold on a second here. You can start to see the piston. There you go. You get a good look at the skirt right there. That sounded wrong.
Ooh. That's pretty neat.
When people talk about fractured rods, they're not talking about this. Now, these are fractured rods, which means they don't have a smooth machine surface between the rod cap and the actual connecting rod. This is definitely not a smooth machine surface. It tried its best. There's part of a bearing fused there. And then look at the rod. The rod's bent, and I've never seen one down to a nub like this. I feel like this should be wrapped up in a bandage. And it did do a little damage to the piston. One little crack right there. And then there's some marks around the crown for making contact with the combustion chamber. The rest of these are actually in pretty good shape. The bearings are decent. There's definitely signs of oil starvation, and there's little metal bits in there, but it's not awful. It's not like they're all wiped out. It's just number 5 that's trashed. The rest of the rods and pistons look good. There's not a lot of skirt wear. Some, but not bad. It's just number 5. And one thing to note, and we're going to dig into this in a minute, you see there's a hole in these bearings. And I have a sneaky suspicion. There we are. Oil pressure goes through the rod and oils the wrist pin. But these are full floaters, so we are going to pull these apart. I'm not going to pull apart this one. We're going to pull apart one of the good ones so we can see what it looks like. Let's pull apart number 4. There's just this little circlip in here. And just got to kind of aim that away from you. That got some serious air. Then you should be able to just tap this wrist pin out of here. Sometimes you can just use a socket. See if I've got a good size socket for that here. This looks to be about a 15 millimeter wrist pin. You can just kind of so there's the rod, and there's the wrist pin, and yes, those wrist pins are bushed. Yes. And then maybe, I guess it sprays the top of the piston. I'll show you this. Come on in. So if you look at the top of that bushing, there's a passage for oil. So oil that wrist pin, and then it goes through the top of the rod. And the only thing I can think of is that it sprays the top of the piston to cool it. Instead of having piston squirters, they're built into the rods. We are not done. This engine has balance shafts, and I had to pull the block off of the stand so we can remove them. We're going to remove this plate, which looks to... Has this been apart before? It just has a different type of casting than the rest of the engine. We'll get this off, and we'll see how to get the balance shafts out. Wow, that's kind of cool. It's got its own tensioner, chain, one balance shaft, another balance shaft, and this is to make sure the balance shaft spins in the opposite direction, I suppose, or the correct direction. What do you guys think is the most dangerous here? I think unbolting the tensioner. We're just going to zip the bolts out and look the other direction. That's fine, and then the other one, we're just going to close our eyes. See, when you close your eyes and you open them, everything is okay. So now I suppose that these will just come out. Do I pry them out? Let's find out. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Oh, it doesn't want to come out. Why not? There we go. Oh man, this thing took a hit. Let's see if this will take this out. Okay, I really don't know. Does this whole assembly come out? I know there's a bolt there. I think this whole thing will come right out. It does. It doesn't want to at all. I don't know why it's stuck. It feels really bad coming out. I'm sure there's an actual reason. Come on. It's like it's, oh, there's a bearing here. It doesn't come out that direction. It'll come out the other direction. Here's one of the balance shafts here. You can see there's metal bits. And then this balance shaft took a few blows. And it fought me hard coming out. Now the other balance shaft, it looks, I would say, worse at the front. It took some pretty good sized whacks right there. That was that rod. And now this came out of the side that has the inspection hole. And this doesn't have an inspection hole, but what it does have is another hole in there. And I'll show you that as soon as I can get the crank out. Okay, now we just got to get the main caps off. Whoa there. Whoa there. That went a little crazy. I don't know why. But I didn't like it. Crank is ready to remove. Crank is ready to remove. It's ready to remove. Jeez Louise. I don't know quite what to do other than it's not that heavy. Okay, it's pretty heavy. As you can see, the main bearings have some pretty good grooves in them. There's definitely been metal run through this. The rear one is probably the worst, followed by one of the middles. And look at the amount of debris in that oil channel. As you start to move towards the rear of the engine, bearings, I mean, they're pretty consistently bad. They're not terrible. I've seen worse. And then, of course, the inspection hole. You can see it try to fit through that door, attack the balance shaft. That was a bad fight. It eventually popped through the side of the block, and then on the other side, fought with that balance shaft, damaged the bottom of the bore, never made it through the block on this side. You can see it did quite a lot of damage though. It contained it to that cylinder really well. I'm pretty impressed with that. It kept all the damage in cylinder 5. The rest of the engine had no idea what was going on. I probably knew. And here is why I couldn't get that balance shaft out that easily. Come here. It's part of a rod bearing hanging out in there. The crankshaft actually looks pretty decent in the front. Some grooves on the main journals, but not bad. And then you get to cylinder 5. All the damage is in cylinder 5. A few good hits on the counterbalance. And look at the discoloration from the heat. It's pretty rough. Oh, we are not done. We still have to pull the oil pump apart. You guys thought I forgot? No, we're going to get this oil pump apart and see what's inside. There's oil in here. Ooh, I don't even know if I can get these pieces out here. This doesn't really want to turn. Oh, yes, it does. It's super gritty. Oh, yeah, it's coming out. Now this piece, I don't know. Yep. Okay. Well, the oil has a grainy texture to it. Some grooves around this mating surface. And same thing on this. This mating surface is pretty chewed up. It's not terrible. It's not as bad as I expected. We have several things to talk about here, but by far the most important is that I solved the mystery of the missing 10mm sockets. They're in your oil pan. And all jokes aside, this engine died from oil starvation. We've seen it 1,000 times, okay, maybe like 60 times on this channel. People don't check their oil. This engine probably had higher mileage based on the cam wear, based on the oil varnish. I don't necessarily think it was ill-maintained. They just didn't check their oil, or maybe something happened and it wasn't properly filled up. We don't really know. Either way, a little knock, come on, man. You heard that, or felt it, or saw it. You had to know. Either way, I can't thank Bill enough for bringing this core by. If you want your 10mm socket, it'll be here. I'll put it on my counter. And I got a few parts I can sell, maybe. I'm not really worried about that. I don't care. This was a free engine. It was a fun experience. And I saw a lot of people tell me in the Mercedes bi-turbo V8 teardown that I haven't seen a tight head bolt until I've worked on an Atlas. Now, this is one Atlas, so not a huge basis for comparison. However, the Mercedes bolts were at least twice as tight. My shoulders hurt for a week after tearing that engine down. This was tight. I'm not going to argue with that. But they came out pretty easily, and I didn't have to throw my shoulder out in the process. Actually, a lot of things kind of fought me on this engine. The crank bolt fought me. The girdle bolts fought me. Either way, it came apart. It really isn't that hard of an engine to work on, but they are expensive for a reason. I've seen different failure modes with these engines at different shops. I've seen them jump time. I've seen them get in an accident, and the crank takes a hit, and it shears the pin off of the crankshaft, which holds the timing sprocket for the timing chain, and then throws it out of time and bends valves. It's all crazy stuff, but that's what you see in this industry. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks again. You guys all owe thanks to Bill for bringing this engine by. And if you'd like to buy parts off of this 2000 4Runner Limited or that 94 Toyota Land Cruiser, which is triple locked, they are available. I'm going to leave our email in the video description. And as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all. And I'll catch you on the next one.